Hey everyone, welcome back into some entitled people stories. Today we've got 3 tales of people who thought they could control others with rules, silence, or sheer audacity, and learned otherwise. One involves a supervisor who hoarded basic information and got a cardboard mountain in return. Another, a pair of car thieves who met 4 half-naked men with a bat and a skateboard. And the last, a cousin who lost access to her own land because of her entitlement. The day I made a cardboard mountain because my supervisor wouldn't share basic information. She shares now. When I was in my early 20s, I took a factory job assembling display boxes for products that were being packaged on a conveyor belt. The job itself was simple. I folded, taped, and stacked flat cardboard into finished boxes that would later be filled in by the line workers. It didn't take long for me to get good at it. After just a few days, I could crank out boxes at a steady, almost mechanical pace. I'd usually finish my assigned stack well before the conveyor belt crew was done with their portion of the run. The factory floor was brutally hot, especially in the summer. There was no air conditioning, just large fans that pushed warm air from one side of the building to the other. The conveyor belt crew had it worse than I did because they had to stand in one spot for hours, constantly grabbing and placing items as they rolled past. One of the women on the line was pregnant and had already fainted twice. A couple of older workers had gone down as well from the heat. I was young, healthy, and didn't mind moving around, so once I finished my boxes, I'd hop over and give someone a short break. It wasn't anything heroic. I just figured if I could help someone sit down for 5 or 10 minutes, why not? The line would keep moving, and nobody would fall over from exhaustion. The women on the belt appreciated it, and we developed a sort of unspoken system. I'd stack my boxes, glance at the pace of the run, and step in wherever I was needed. To make this system smoother, I went to the line supervisor, Carol, and asked a simple question: how many items are in this run? I said if I know the total, I can figure out how many boxes to make before I jump in and help. It wasn't a complicated request. I just wanted to do a little math in my head so I wouldn't overshoot or undershoot what was needed. Carol didn't like that. She was one of those supervisors who enjoyed the tiny bit of authority she had and guarded information like it was classified. She narrowed her eyes at me and said, "That's not your concern. Your job is to make boxes. That's it." I tried to explain that knowing the run total would help the whole team, but she cut me off. "You make boxes. Let the line worry about the line." All right then. If my only job was to make boxes, I would make boxes. I went back to my station and did exactly that. I folded cardboard, I taped seams, I stacked finished boxes as high as I safely could. I didn't glance at the conveyor belt. I didn't offer anyone a break. I didn't ask questions. I just kept making boxes as fast as my hands could move. By the time the run ended, I'd created a small cardboard mountain. We had hundreds more boxes than the line would ever need for that batch. They were stacked along the wall, behind my station, and even partially blocking a walkway. When the conveyor finally stopped, the line of workers looked over at me with a mix of confusion and understanding. They knew exactly what had happened. She said your job was to make boxes, not to think, so you made boxes, lots of boxes. The fact that nobody needed them wasn't your problem anymore. You were just following instructions. The real fun began when the floor manager, Mr. Daniels, came over to see why half the crew was now breaking down and flattening perfectly good boxes. He looked at the stacks and then at Carol. "Why do we have this many extras?" he asked. Carol mumbled something about productivity and efficiency. He turned to me and said, "What happened here?" I shrugged and kept my tone polite. I was told my only job is to make boxes. I wasn't given the run total, so I just made as many as I could until the run was finished. There was a long pause while Mr. Daniels processed that. He glanced at Carol, who suddenly seemed very interested in inspecting a clipboard. "So you didn't know how many were needed?" he asked. "No, sir," I replied. "I asked, but I was told it wasn't my business." The cleanup took the entire crew a good chunk of time. Every extra box had to be broken down, flattened, and stacked for reuse later. It was tedious, unnecessary work in an already sweltering factory. The line workers were exhausted, and Carol looked furious, though she couldn't exactly blame me without admitting she'd withheld basic information. The next day, when a new run started, Carol walked over to my station before I even asked. "We're doing 2,400 units, she said stiffly. I nodded and did the math in my head. I made the exact number of boxes needed, plus a small buffer. Once I was done, I stepped over to the conveyor and tapped one of the older workers on the shoulder. "Go sit down for 5 minutes, I told her. I've got this." From that point on, Carol grudgingly gave me the run numbers every time. I went back to helping the line whenever I finished early. The factory was still hot, people still sweated through their uniforms, and the job was still repetitive. But at least no one had to spend an hour breaking down a cardboard skyscraper because someone wanted to play power games. All it took was doing exactly what I was told, no more and no less for the lesson to stick. And our second story. That time I accidentally claimed a stolen Honda as my own, and the thieves actually believed me. This happened a few years ago when I was still driving a beat-up but loyal 1995 Honda Civic. If you know anything about older Hondas, you know they're basically catnip for car thieves. They're easy to break into, easy to start if you know what you're doing, and easy to part out. My city's always had a pretty steady car theft problem, so when I bought the Civic, I had a hidden kill switch installed. It was one of those just-in-case decisions that felt slightly paranoid at the time. One night around 2 a.m, I woke up to a sound that didn't make any sense in my half-asleep brain. It was the unmistakable grinding whine of my engine trying to turn over. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then it happened again. Someone was trying to start my car. My heart jumped straight into my throat. The kill switch was doing its job. The engine would crank but never fully start, which meant whoever was in there didn't know about the hidden cutoff. I didn't stop to think. I didn't put on pants. I just bolted out of bed and ran straight to the front porch in nothing but my underwear. From the top of the steps, I bellowed as loud and deep as I could, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" 2 figures immediately scrambled out of my Civic and took off down the street. I was shaking from adrenaline and cold night air, but the shouting had worked. The noise woke up my roommates, who came stumbling downstairs asking what was going on. I told them someone had just tried to steal my car, and we all stood there peering into the dark like raccoons guarding a trash can. After a few minutes of silence, we figured they were gone. Then I heard the sound again. Another engine trying to start, same grinding struggle. It was coming from just a few feet away. I yelled back into the house, "They're back!" And my roommates came charging out. This time, more prepared. One guy grabbed a baseball bat, another picked up his skateboard like it was a shield. None of us were looking to throw hands, but we weren't exactly aiming for polite conversation either. We lined up on the porch in various states of undress, boxers, pajama pants, one guy barefoot with bedhead sticking up in all directions. Across the curb from my Civic was another old Honda, almost identical, and 2 guys were inside trying to get it started. I realized what had happened. They'd tried mine first, failed, and then moved on to the next easiest target. We didn't rush them. We just stood there and shouted, "Get out of there!" My roommate with the bat yelled. I added, "You picked the wrong block tonight." The driver of the other Honda leaned out and shouted back, No, this is my car. We're just trying to leave. It's my car." Even half-dressed and furious, I knew that was nonsense. The door panel was hanging loose and the steering column looked torn apart. It screamed stolen vehicle. Something about the absurdity of the moment took over my brain. Maybe it was adrenaline, maybe it was sleep deprivation, but I shouted back, "No, that's my car now. That one's mine too." 4 guys in their underwear on a porch, one holding a bat, one holding a skateboard, and you just claimed a stolen car as your own? The logic doesn't hold up. But at 2 a.m. with adrenaline pumping, it worked. They didn't argue, they just ran. There was a pause. I could practically see the confusion from across the street. Okay, man, one of them said. Then both of them jumped out and took off running again. They didn't even argue. They just bailed. For a second, we all stood there stunned. One of my roommates started laughing. "Did you just claim their stolen car?" he asked. I shrugged and said, "Apparently." I think what really made it work was the sight of 4 grown men standing on a porch in underwear and pajamas, armed with a bat and a skateboard, yelling like feral raccoons defending territory. I called the police right away and explained what had happened. We stayed outside while we waited, scanning the block in case the guys decided to circle back. They didn't. When officers arrived, they checked the second Honda. Sure enough, it had been reported stolen earlier that week. The ignition was damaged and the VIN confirmed it wasn't registered to anyone on our street. One of the officers looked at me and said, "Good thing your car didn't start." I told him about the kill switch and he nodded approvingly. "Smart move," he said. They had the stolen Honda towed so it could be returned to its actual owner. I never found out who that was, but I like to imagine they were relieved to hear it hadn't been stripped or wrecked. After everything calmed down, we went back inside and tried to go back to sleep, though that didn't happen easily. The adrenaline took a while to fade. The next morning, I checked my Civic more closely. The steering column had some minor damage from their attempt, but otherwise it was fine. That little hidden switch probably saved me from weeks of headaches. I never did see those guys again. Maybe they decided our street wasn't worth the trouble. Maybe the image of 4 nearly naked men claiming random Hondas in the middle of the night was enough to send them looking for easier prey. All I know is that the kill switch paid for itself that night, and for a brief moment, I apparently owned 2 Civics. To this day, whenever someone asks me why I'm paranoid about anti-theft measures, I tell them this story. There's nothing quite like waking up to the sound of your own car trying to leave without you, and there's definitely nothing quite like standing on your porch in your underwear, declaring ownership over a thief's getaway car, and somehow having it work. And our last story. Now she's losing access to her own land and her reputation. In May of 2024, my wife's sister, Sarah, married the kind of man you almost don't believe is real until you meet him. Heath had been with her for 8 years, and in that time, he became more than a fiancé. He stepped into the role of father for Sarah's daughter, Kate, who was 16 by then, without ever making it feel forced. A few weeks after the wedding, he legally adopted her. It was one of those rare moments where everything in a messy world feels like it lands exactly where it should. Heath was the glue in any room he walked into. He was the first to volunteer to help someone move, the guy who stayed behind after cookouts to scrub grills and haul trash bags, and the one who always found an excuse to gather everyone together. His 50th birthday party was classic Heath, multiple grills going at once, bourbon flowing, music loud enough to make the neighbors smile instead of complain. A month later, almost to the day, he died of a massive heart attack. I stood next to him as a groomsman in May, and by November, I was one of his pallbearers in the same church. Our family doesn't do in-laws, we just absorb people. My wife's brothers are my brothers, her sisters are my sisters, and her parents treat the 3 of us like sons. Heath fit that mold instantly. Losing him shattered something fundamental. Celebrating a wedding and then planning a funeral within 6 months for the same person is not something you prepare for, no matter how organized you think you are. Heath had been meticulous about most things in life, but he never formally decided where he wanted to be buried. A few weeks before he passed, he and my mother-in-law, Jackie, had a casual conversation about final plans. Jackie mentioned the family plot where her grandparents and parents were buried. There were still spaces available because most cousins had made other arrangements. Heath had said lightly that he liked the thought of resting there with them one day. When he died, decisions had to be made quickly. Sarah owned the plot where he was buried, along with the one beside it. The space was available, the paperwork was in order, and we buried him that Friday. On Monday, Jackie received a call from her cousin Bertha. Not condolences, not even a simple, "I'm sorry." The first words out of Bertha's mouth were, "How could you bury that stranger next to Grandma?" Jackie later told us the call was mostly Bertha talking and Jackie listening in disbelief. Bertha ranted about family tradition and how wrong it was to place that man beside their grandmother. She bragged that she already had been to the town hall to see what could be done. Jackie's only response was steady and raw. "Bertha, he was my son. We just buried him. We didn't know what else to do." Mitch, my father-in-law, said he'd never seen Jackie so angry in their 45 years of marriage. That first phone call told them everything they needed to know about who Bertha really was. Not a word of sympathy for a grieving widow, not a moment of pause for the family planning a funeral. Just immediate cold concern about a stranger in Grandma's cemetery. She showed her hand before anyone else even had a chance to breathe. A few days later, another cousin's wife, Charlotte, called. This time, the news was worse. Bertha and her twin sister had consulted a lawyer and were planning to attempt legal action to have Heath removed. That was the moment my in-laws decided Sarah needed to know. Sarah was stunned. She was grieving her husband, navigating life as a widow, helping her daughter process losing the father she had just legally gained, and now she had to defend his grave. Legally, she was protected. She owned the plots, but legality doesn't soften betrayal. My wife was one of the last to hear, not because they were hiding it from her, but because everyone knows her instincts lean toward nuclear options when someone threatens her family. When she heard, there was no hesitation. "Move him," she said. "Move Grandpa and Grandma too. If they want that cemetery so badly, they can choke on it." It wasn't grief talking, it was calculation wrapped in fury. There's some context that makes this more than just emotional retaliation. Jackie's grandparents had set aside a 12-plot section decades ago. Only 5 plots were occupied at the time: the grandparents, Jackie's parents, one cousin, and Heath. If Heath and Jackie's parents were moved, that would create multiple empty plots, all owned by our immediate family. Combined with Sarah's adjacent plot and Jackie and Mitch's reserve spaces, we would control the majority of what remained. We moved quickly. In January, Heath and Jackie's parents were reinterred on family farmland. The land is quiet, framed by tall pines and open fields. It feels peaceful in a way the crowded cemetery never did. There's room for the rest of us there if we choose it. It's private, dignified, and undeniably ours. That farmland has a single access path that runs across property Jackie co-owns with her brother. That same path is the only access to Bertha's adjacent land. The frontage of Bertha's property is tree-lined with no direct road entrance. At my wife's suggestion, when planting season begins, the farmers renting the land will disc over the old path and establish a new one closer to the new family cemetery. The old path, the one Bertha relies on, will simply cease to exist. We haven't announced this plan. We don't intend to. At some point, when planting season starts and heavy equipment arrives, Bertha will discover that access to her land has become significantly more complicated. Legally, everything is sound. The landowners have every right to alter their own access routes. It just happens to be inconvenient timing for someone who tried to drag a grieving widow into court over a grave site. Bertha's well known in the community. She's a respected medical educator, someone many nurses in the county trained under. My wife happens to be equally respected in the same circles. She hasn't gone on a public tirade. She hasn't posted dramatic accusations online. She simply made sure that people who ask understand exactly what Bertha tried to do to a grieving family. Information spreads quietly in small communities. It doesn't need a megaphone. Some people think revenge should be loud. My wife prefers it methodical. Bridges don't have to explode to be gone. Sometimes they're just removed, plank by plank, until there's nothing left to cross. Heath deserved peace. If that peace came at the cost of someone else's convenience and reputation, so be it. Some actions echo for years, and not all echoes fade in the direction the speaker expects. Some problems get solved with cardboard, some get solved with absurdity, and some get solved with farmland. Story 1 was the quiet rebellion of overproduction. Carol wanted to hoard information and keep a box maker in their lane. She got a box maker who made boxes until the run ended. Hundreds more than anyone needed. Sometimes the cheapest lesson is a mountain of cardboard. Story 2 was the power of pure spectacle. 2 car thieves picked the wrong car, kill switch, the wrong street, and the wrong group of sleep-deprived roommates. 4 half-dressed men with a bat and a skateboard yelling, "That's my car now," over a stolen Honda they didn't own. That's performance art. But story 3 wins. Not because of the land, though controlling access to Bertha's property is beautifully permanent, but because of the patience. Bertha couldn't wait a week before attacking a grieving widow over a grave. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.